So one of the things about working in Formula One is how often we seem to spend time talking about the complexity of what we do. And of course, it is inherently complex. And yet, one of the really important things to do is then, through that complexity, to focus in on some very simple, clearly understood KPIs, measurements that over which you're really happy to stand. So let's think about, for example, when we manufacture a Formula One car, obviously we're going to measure its performance. The performance is simply measured in terms of its speed, denoted by lap time. And so that's incredibly measurable. And by the way, it's very measurable against the competition. We can then also focus on quality and reliability. So the quality of the systems, the reliability of the technology which we have deployed, because there's no point in having the latest, greatest complex technology if it's unreliable and low quality. So quality and reliability KPIs are all important. We have this saying in Formula One, to finish first you have to finish. So it's quite a apparently boring metric around quality and reliability. They're actually extremely important to Formula One teams. First Formula One race of this year in 2023, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, one of the really fancied runners, it broke down. Their car keeps failing them. So on the reliability sort of metric, very, very simple, easy to understand, easy to measure metric. They're just failing to deliver. And then, of course, you take, for example, risk or safety in the case of Formula One. So, whatever else we do, we have to make sure we manage the risk really effectively. And that applies not just in Formula One, but in lots and lots of industries where safety or risk management, think about financial services, for example, you've got to have really strong KPIs around that, making sure that, in our case, every Formula One employee goes home safely to their family every day. So actually, through this complex environment, we focus on some very clearly understood, easy to measure KPIs, which again, the entire team can become aligned behind and understand these are the key priorities for us. It's over these measurements that we, succeed or fail, and that's where our focus comes. And I think that's a really important takeaway from my experience of working with competitive teams.
In the book, we talk quite a bit about bureaucracy and the Japanese knotweed of bureaucracy. It seems to get everywhere. And Max Weber probably was the father of bureaucracy around about the early 1900s. And he created it to create the most efficient and rational way to organise human activity, and get the processes and hierarchies in place to maintain order, maximise efficiency, and eliminate favouritism. And you go, well, that probably would have worked in 1910 when we're in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. However, even Weber himself saw that unfettered bureaucracy was a threat to individual freedom and a potential to trap individuals in an impersonal regime of rule-based rational control. And I think, unfortunately, in some organisations, that's come to life. So it's interesting, isn't it? Organisations, I think there's an old saying which bureaucracy grows around about 6 or 7% a year. So if you're not pruning your organisation back at 6 or 7% a year, you're slowing things down. And one of the sort of aspects we have here at S&S, and one of the things we've been trying to do, is sort of talk about minimum viable process and minimum viable policy. In other words, what's the minimum we can get away with that helps guide people in the right way but doesn't constrain? Most policies and processes are put in place to manage the 1% of your workforce, but in the meantime constrain 99% of the workforce in some way. And so it's sometimes a proxy for management, right? We just put a policy or a process in place rather than just giving them some good guidance and helping adults, be adult and self-organise. But I just wonder, what's your view on, from a Formula One point of view, around how much bureaucracy are they willing to put up with? How much do they just have to cut through that stuff? And again, the transparency, the purpose, the winning mentality, all of those kind of things drive bureaucracy to a minimum level.
Well, it'll come as no surprise that within the Formula One environment, bureaucracy isn't something we are particularly keen on, because it slows us down. Exactly to the point you mentioned earlier, we want the minimum, most efficient sort of minimum sort of number of people involved in delivering efficient outcomes for us. Think about the Formula One pit stop. We have 22 people who deliver 36 tasks in 2 seconds. If we doubled the number of people, sort of 44 people, they'd be tripping over each other. If we didn't have enough people, it would take far longer than 2 seconds. So we've optimized that particular outcome in a pit stop. But the other thing is that, bureaucracy from our point of view is something we've seen in some of the really unsuccessful Formula One teams. We talked earlier on about Toyota's failure in Formula One. It'll come as no surprise to know they were also numerically the largest team that had ever existed. They employed something like 1,500 staff, which at the time was really, double what anyone else had in terms of the number of people. So they were bogged down in rigid systems and processes and structures which had evolved from the Toyota way of manufacturing Toyota Corollas, and they were applying that kind of bureaucratic structure to Formula One, where agility and adaptability and speed of delivery is just all important. So, we like to cut through that. Japanese knotweed of bureaucracy, as you mentioned, and make sure that we have the most efficient way of working as a business.
For more information, please visit sullivanstanley.com/future business formula.